It's really hard to sum up just exactly what we feel for a person or for people when we give a gift. And I think that's why I like to make things. It's because, you know, it's a little piece of myself in there as well. The thoughts and also the effort is what counts for me a lot of times. And that's why I'm taking this big black walnut board here and just getting some rough dimensions to make a frame, just in the style of the frame I made for my son. But it's going to be a frame that houses a copy of my parents' marriage certificates on the occasion of 40 years of marriage, which is, I think, a pretty amazing accomplishment. And this project, like so many others, begins at the bandsaw. We're going to be ripping this board down to a single strip of wood that will be later divided into 4 sections, which I will miter then together to make a frame. And the effect will be that the grain wraps all the way around the frame, and it just has a much more unified look in the end. This first piece here that I just cut off is going to be just waste, really. I'll use it for another project. And that piece right there is the one I'm going to be using for the actual frame. It was the best single section I could find on there, but as you'll see in a second, there's a knot that appears that I hadn't originally accounted for. So this one and that one are going to be stored on the, I guess, on the lumber rack up there, along with any other offcuts I've got on this board, because it was pretty badly twisted and bowed and whatnot. And now comes the moment of truth. When we put the iron to that board, it's going to reveal the grain underneath those saw marks. And you know, I think it was Michelangelo who said that he could see the figure within the marble block. It wasn't a marble block to him. It was the statue already in his mind. And not that I'm some Michelangelo here, but I'm just saying that I could, every step I take, I see it getting closer and closer. And so there is something nice about just seeing the little by little progress. Getting those full-length shavings. And then finally putting it all together and finishing it. I started by getting one true edge, getting that nice and flat, and then when I got a full-length shaving with my number 8 there, then I just made sure I used that as a reference and started taking down the other edges to it and just started getting my reference edges. On the one end here you can see it's pretty thick, and that's the end that's up against this little block at the end. And since I've got about a 6-foot piece here and my bench is about 6 foot, I had to improvise the solution. It worked out okay. You'll see I have to move a clamp in just a second here. But yeah, this was a pretty good solution. This here's my number 5, which has come to be one of my favorites as well. The story behind it's really simple. I just saw it in an antique shop. It was a rust bucket. Bought it after negotiating the price down to like 12, 10 bucks and restored it. And my grandfather, he was a carpenter all his life, and I sent him some pictures of this, and it always meant a lot to me because we got to talk about it. It was a talking point for us. And it looks like you've just met Eleanor, which I'm going to mention her again later in the video. But as you might have guessed, I was using my marking gauge to get everything down to an equal thickness or width here. And again, it's just getting your stock prepped for actually doing the real fine work on it. Alright, so all that work, I had to take off a ton. It must have been at least 1/8 of an inch, maybe more along the whole thing, maybe 3/16. So here it is. It's pretty straight, pretty square. Like I said, it took a lot of work. And now I'm going to turn this into the picture frame. I got this huge knot here, which I had not planned on including. So hopefully I'll be able to just cut it there. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these clamps here, and I'm just going to clamp down either end. So now that I've exposed all this wood, this is a pretty old piece, must be a couple years. I've had it in the basement for at least a year. There's my daughter. She's been accompanying me the whole time. I'm just going to clamp it down, and that way it doesn't warp too much, at least I hope. So we'll see what happens. And now, once again, I'm using the marking gauge to set the precise measurements for the rabbets I'm going to cut. I based the width of the rabbet off the iron I'm going to use to cut it, and then I was just marking the depth of the rabbet right there. I actually also came in and used that marking gauge that I just set the width for off the iron to pre-score the line. And I know there's a nicker on the plane itself, but you know, you don't tend to use them whenever you're going with the grain on rabbets. So I just scored it. And now we're giving it a real good sharpening before we start cutting some rabbets. Man, I just love the Stanley 45. It is so fun to use at times, and then at other times it's really frustrating, especially as a lefty. And you might have some thoughts that you might want to keep to yourself at this point, but very shortly after this moment, and you'll see coming up in the video, it occurred to me I can just switch the fence over, and that was a game changer for me. Here I'm just taking the shoulder plane I've made, I'm cleaning up the cut, making sure it's nice and square, and that there's no little strings of walnut hanging around. And then taking some sandpaper as well, because I actually am going to sand this all down when I'm done, because I kind of like the feel it gives it whenever I put the wipe on poly and paste wax finish. Here I'm going to be marking the rabbet I'm going to cut underneath the rabbet I just made, so there'll be a lip. And again, you can go view the video about the frame that I made for my son Isaac. It's exactly the same thing. We're just going to cut away a lot of wood and leave a little lip, and that creates a really cool effect on the frame. At this point, you might have noticed that I did move the fence to the other side of the plane, and it is going really well. Some little issues with the depth adjuster, but this was so much better of an experience for me. In a second here, you'll be able to see that I left the knot in and decided not to cut it out because I just realized I could hide it on the back side and on the inside, and that it would give me much more length and I could make a much larger frame, which also meant that I could have a larger mat on which to mount the certificate copy itself. In the end, it was a beautiful, beautiful effect that I'm really glad I did, and it worked out perfectly, again, because the knot is not even showing. For this, I just went to Lowe's, and it was really simple and really cheap to get a piece of glass exactly the size I needed it. Then I just used that piece of glass as a template so I could cut my matting as well. Now, I just want to let you know that if you cut along the edge of this glass, it can leave little microscopic shards of glass that I found out, and didn't hurt me, but you have to be careful of that. So I might recommend instead just using a pencil to trace the outline. Then after that, I need to mark the border, what I'm going to cut away on the inside, as you can see here. And I just took my square, marked an edge all the way around, got it even, and then I just cut it away, making sure that I had a very sharp blade, fresh blade on that. And then it was just a matter of assembling it all. And here's the final product. I can't even tell you how giddy, excited I was to give this to them. They're such an example to me. 40 years of marriage and just love and being great parents and spouses to each other. And framing their marriage certificate, or the copy, is something my brother and sisters and I came up with together. Of course, we used a copy of it because we didn't want to put the original in there. And this is a time when I think, you know, it really is true. It's better to give than to receive. Because giving this, I feel like I got so much more than if someone would have given me something. And I know that they just loved it as well. So here's to you, Mom and Dad, and just thank you for everything. Happy 40th anniversary. Love you guys.